1. Jane can't drive you to the airport. 2. I can't meet you tomorrow. 3. We can pay the bill. 3 sentences. Were you able to quickly and easily understand all of them? Or were you not sure sometimes if you heard can or can't? Or maybe you understood, but only after a moment of thinking about what you heard. And here's another question. What happens if someone says they can meet you, but in fact they cannot? Or if you didn't understand if a client can or cannot pay their bill? Hello again, Planet, and thanks for listening to Master English with Tim, the podcast where every Monday Tim helps you boost your English from intermediate to advanced by teaching you English in depth and detail and without ever hurrying. I am Tim, and in this week's episode, I'm going to teach you how to more easily understand if you have heard can or can't when you hear this key modal verb in conversation, TV, or movies. If you want to easily understand can, you need to understand 2 things. You need to understand its meanings and its pronunciations. Let's talk first for a moment about the meanings of can. In fact, can has 4 commonly used functions or meanings. These functions are for talking about permission, for making requests, for talking about abilities, and for talking about probability. Let's look at each of these functions quickly now. The first function of can is to talk about permission, or to say what is allowed and not allowed. For example, a kid might say, "Mom, I finished my homework. Can I go outside and play now?" Or, in some states in the United States, you can drive a car when you are just 14. That's permission. Now, the second function is requests, or asking another person to do something. For instance, in a restaurant, you might say, "Can I have another cup of tea, please?" Or imagine that your car doesn't work, so you call your uncle and you ask him, "Tom, can you please come to my house and see what's wrong with my car?" The third function of can is for talking about ability. For example, if you've listened to this podcast for a while, you probably know that I, Tim, can speak Russian and a few other languages. The final function of can is to talk about a kind of medium-level probability, an event that happens from time to time. For instance, you could say, "Be careful, Mr. Jones can get pretty angry when he hasn't slept enough." Okay, now we are done with the functions or meanings of can, all 4 of them. Now, let's move on to the details of pronunciation of can. Actually, like I mentioned earlier, there's a kind of crazy problem that a lot of students have with understanding can. The problem is that the positive form can and the negative form can't sound very similar to each other, but there is an easy solution that you will learn a little bit later. So let's look at why students confuse can't and can. So the negative form can't has 2 different pronunciations. One is the classic book form that you hear in school, can't. I'll say it again, can't. In this classic book-like pronunciation, you can clearly hear the short vowel ah, the same sound that you hear in cat or fast. And you can also clearly hear the t sound at the end of the word. When you hear that final t sound, you can almost feel the little explosion of air coming out of the speaker's mouth. Now, I want you to do an experiment. Take your hand, look at your hand right now, and now put your hand in front of your mouth and say t. Do it now, say t. If you did it correctly, you could feel that air hitting your hand when you said t. Now let's move on to the second pronunciation of can't. It sounds like this, can't. In this pronunciation, we can still hear the short vowel sound ah. However, the t sound at the end of the word is different. You see, when native speakers pronounce the t sound, especially at the end of a word, they often let the air build up in their mouths, but then don't make that explosion. And that, my friends, is what happens when you pronounce the t in the second and more common pronunciation of can't. With the stop t sound, the pronunciation is again can't. So now listen to 3 example sentences. I will read each example twice, the first time with the full t sound and the second time with the stop t. But remember, both the first sentence and the second one will be the negative form of can. So 3 examples. 1, I can't help you. I can't help you. 2, she can't speak English. She can't speak English. 3rd and last, we can't come to the party. We can't come to the party. Now, I said earlier in this episode that students can easily misunderstand people. They don't always hear the difference between negative can't or can't and the positive form can. I think now you can hear why it's easy to confuse can't and can. However, I have good news for you. English speakers, in fact, rarely say the positive form can. Instead of saying can, they use the chewing gum form kin. Listen to it again. Kin. It has 3 sounds. The first is k, and the last is n. The sound that is interesting for us, though, is the vowel in the middle of the word. It's something between the I in fish or big and the sound at the end of table. So, fish, big, and the sound at the end of table. Table, So, something between I and Okay, now listen to 7 examples of the real-world kin pronunciation in sentences. 1, yes, I can meet you tomorrow. 2, you can speak English well. 3, he can get pretty angry when he hasn't drunk his coffee. 4, she can run a kilometer in 4 minutes. 5, bring an umbrella. It can start raining pretty quickly. Now actually, let me add another pronunciation here. Instead of it can, the pronunciation is icken. Listen closely. Bring an umbrella. It can start raining pretty quickly. Number 6, we can pay you on Monday. 7th and last, they can meet us tomorrow. Okay, now you've heard 7 examples of kin. And you know what? I think you understand now that you've already heard kin many times since you started learning English. Now listen to 6 questions with kin. 1, can I go outside and play now, Mom? 2, can you please turn your music down? 3, can she meet us tomorrow at noon? 4, can he speak Spanish too? 5, can we have the dessert menu, please? 6th and last, can they work on Saturday? Okay, so these forms with kin maybe seem a bit extreme, but we have an even more extreme and reduced form of can, believe it or not. The version of can that I'm going to tell you is used only in questions, and it consists of just one sound, k. So, can I becomes kai. Can you becomes q. Can he is ki. So the h in he also disappears. So again, can he becomes simply ki. Can we is qui. Here they are all together. Kai, Q, ki, and qui. So can I? Kai. Can you? Q. Can he? Ki. Can we? Qui. So maybe you are wondering right now about she and they. Do we have forms like kshi and kthey? Well, you can probably hear those from time to time, but they sound a bit strange. That's because in English, words don't start with k and then sh. We can hear the combination ksh in words like action or fiction, but the combination ksh never happens at the start of a word. And if ksh is weird at the beginning of a word, kth, like you would have in kthey, is even weirder. You can't hear the sounds k and the together at the beginning of any word. And in fact, I can't think of where you would hear them in any word at all in the middle, beginning, or end. Okay, so now let's hear 4 real-life examples of the extreme chewing gum form of can, which is simply k. Ready? 1. Can I get another cup of coffee, please? 2. Can you please bring me that book? 3. Can you really run a mile in 4 minutes? 4th and last. Can we please go home now? Okay, I have one more detail that I need to add. I think I mentioned earlier that English speakers rarely say the full positive form can. They always say kin or even k. But we do have situations where we say the book form can. We say can when the person we are talking to thinks that we said or meant can't. So if someone thinks that you can't meet them tomorrow and that's not true, then you would say, I can meet you tomorrow. Or if you're a boss in an office and your workers are angry because they are not allowed to wear jeans on Fridays, you can tell them, I told you that you can wear jeans on Fridays. Okay, so that is all for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you all next Monday.